First we have chord. Um, Here's an example of a source image you use where you have this light lighting the character. And there's a couple other ones which are not so extreme, where it's more sort of daylight lit and the glowing object has sort of a minimal effect on him. But I feel like this was the one that was closest to what your images look like. And a couple of things I note here is that there is detail lit by other lights, like there's some daylight lighting this area here, whereas yours doesn't have that kind of contrast, and you have a lot of stuff falling to black. So what I'd encourage you to do is have kind of a slightly blue tinted light to contrast this and fill in a lot of these very dark shadow areas. The other thing you might notice about this is see how whatever's closest to this is lit very bright. For example, this area here is so bright it's overexposed, and his forearm is very bright, but by the time we get to his face it's not as brightly lit. And for that you might want to try using the decay on the light, like use a quadratic decay. You might find you have to turn up the intensity to do that. But for example, if the source of light is right here, which I think it's supposed to be, this kind of backboard thing would be very, very bright. It would be overexposed, and this would be, less lit than that. And in fact, but we have the opposite. We have this very bright and overexposed, and we have this less lit. So, yeah, and that's a nice dramatic thing, but again, fill in the background with some detail. So, yeah, this is good work. It's dramatic. I think it's pretty close, and I would just like to see yeah, a little bit more, and definitely kind of filling in with that contrasting cool colored daylight. By cool I mean slightly blue tinted daylight. Next we've got Mario. Yeah, this is looking pretty good. It'd be good to see a couple other shots or angles on it. But I like that he's got a nice kind of rim light on the head and some highlights here. It looks interesting. Not sure why we're getting those kind of bright areas there. You mentioned it's not showing up smooth. What I suspect it is in Maya. If you're in the polygons menu set and you go to normal, select your surface and go to normals, soften edge. If you look at like a sphere, by default it's softened. So if I go normals, harden edge, it looks like that. And if I go to normals, soften edge, it'll look like that. So I think that's your issue here. Yeah, maybe, I don't know if he has eyeballs right now, but typically maybe getting a little bit more light on his face, maybe just some little area light or something, just to get his face brightened up a little bit, because we want to see those facial details, and our eyes are attracted to areas of highest contrast, which in this case is this sort of forearm area. So that might be a little distracting to have that be the brightest area in the frame, but so maybe a little bit more light on the face would help it out. But yeah, overall it's a good. We've got Mark here, and yeah, this is a nice look. It's always good when you have some contrasting colors going on in different areas of shadow and light. It's good to have the sort of a cooler color in the background and a warmer color on the character. It could be good to fill in some of the darker areas on the character. If we look at, let's look at this angle here. You'll notice how sort of dark this side of him is and the front of his visor. And one way that you could fill that in is to simulate the light of the television set. So you could have a slightly blue tinted, maybe area light hitting him from the front, relatively low intensity, that kind of fills those in a little bit, might give you a little more contrast in the character. And I feel like that front of him is too dark for a room that's otherwise pretty well lit. The light would sort of bounce around the room and fill that in. You'll want to have something through the window so it's not totally black. You could put even just like a photo of the outdoors, or even just like a really overexposed bright image if it's daytime, or just some kind of lights if it's dark. And then for the floor, oops. Yeah, just either put in a surface there. I don't know why it's black, but if it's lacking light, you'll want to get some light pointed at it, or maybe a texture's missing or there's not a surface there. I'm not sure what the deal is, but whatever, make sure there's some kind of visible floor. However you decide to do it. But yeah, overall it's got a nice look. It's kind of got different areas of light. It's got some color contrast. There's nothing too overexposed. I would say the main thing is, getting the floor of the window fixed and filling in some of this very dark area on the character. So this is Erica, and yeah, definitely got a good nighttime feeling going on here. It really looks like a moonlit scene. Maybe try to bump up the brightness of the character a little bit compared to the background. In a shot like this, the brightness of the green kind of overtakes it. So if you can get that to be a little dimmer, or get a little bit more light on your character. If you could get him kind of a rim light to separate him from the background, kind of a bright light along the edge, just kind of, either get your moonlight to hit that or shine another light on him to fake it. I mean, you have a little bit of a sense of a rim, right here, but there he gets kind of lost against the background. So a nice bright rim. I mean, you've kind of got a rim here going on good, which is what I was talking about. But if you can get that for his whole body, that would be good. And then you mentioned the spotlight with the glow, and unfortunately, spotlight with the glow, you'll notice I changed this to Maya software, and you'll get that that glow. But when using Mental Ray, fortunately, the optical effects like the glow does not render in Mental Ray. So yeah, you'd have to use my software, but I don't know if you want to get my software because you may not be able to get the look that you want otherwise. So it's a trade-off. So we've got Yuri. I think that it'd be good to kind of break up the area with some light. It's maybe too evenly lit, and I think it'd be good to think more about the light sources. Is it lit only by sort of internal fluorescence, and if so, are those just at the top? Are there lights on the ground? Are there emergency lights or warning lights, or just kind of thinking about what are the sources of light and where are they located? Right now, it's a little bit maybe too flat and even. And the other thing is that this back wall seems to have fallen into darkness, and in an otherwise sort of evenly well lit room, you'd expect that to have some light bouncing on it as well. So yeah, and I think just thinking about light sources, where those light sources are, and kind of trying to break things up a little bit, so it's not quite so flat. And you can do things to make the character pop, like try to justify some source of light that gives him a rim light along his edge to help him separate him from the background. It's helpful. And then of course cast shadows will help put him on the ground. This is Todd, and yeah, this is a nice look. It's a very warm look. I think what you can do that I think you'll like is to contrast that with a little bit of sort of daylight. So imagine that there was like a window on the left here, and get kind of a bluish tint light hitting him from this side, and that would kind of help fill in some of the dark areas on a lot of these surfaces, but it will also add some nice contrast, so it's not sort of so evenly warm. And sometimes even that bluer light, sort of daylight, can actually make the warm light look even warmer because it's not so even across the whole thing. It'll show the contrast of that color a bit. So I would say just give that a shot, see if you like it. Throw maybe an area light where you'd imagine there'd be a window, and give it a little bit of a blue tint and see if you like what you get. But I mean, overall it looks good. Things are pretty clear. The other thing I would consider doing is some kind of faking some kind of bounce light from the ground, just so that under his chin and under his nose and those kinds of areas aren't quite so dark, because right now they're very dark, and in a room like this there'd be enough light bouncing around that you wouldn't quite get such dark shadows. So even just like a directional light pointing up, that's sort of the color of the floor, can help fill in those shadows a little bit. But yeah, overall it's looking pretty good. So this is Joseph, and I definitely like the The contrast, the color contrast, is a little bit of what I've talked about in some of the other ones, where you have like the cooler light coming from one side and the warmer light coming from the other, and just kind of really helps sculpt the shapes a little bit. One thing I think that you're not getting though is you said under a bright noon day. So if you pulled up reference of a bright noon day, what you would find is very bright light areas and very dark shadows. It's just a high contrast thing. The shadows more or less straight underneath the object, not long shadows, but kind of small shadows, because at noon the sun is overhead. So you're not necessarily getting the bright noon thing, because that's characterized by a very high contrast. Whereas this is, yes, you have some color contrast going on, but as far as light and shadow, you don't have any kind of extreme contrast going on. Here's a sort of a midday sun photo where you can see, dark shadows here underneath. We're on the actual, the sun's a little bit over to this side. So we're a little bit on the shadow side of these objects, which is good for photography. But you see that shadow is mostly underneath them. It's bright light, dark shadows. You can see like this white area is overexposed here because the sun is so bright. So I think that's sort of what you look for if you want that noonday sun thing, of that kind of higher contrast image. Next we have James, and we got this torchlit scene. So you're definitely getting a feeling of this being the main light source. If you can soften your shadows, that can help too, because firelight might have a little bit of a softer shadow. And the other thing is just to bring out some detail. You could bring in another light source. Now it could be that in reality he's so deep in the cave that the torch is truly the only light source, but you can take some creative license. So I might do sort of a contrasting color light, like a cooler light coming from the side here maybe, and maybe just getting a little bit of highlight on some of these edges, and on his side here, just to kind of bring out some of the shape and things don't fall so much into darkness, and you'll be forgiven for a little bit of creative license if you keep it kind of subtle and just kind of get like maybe a little bit of blue light to just bring out the edges of some of these things. But yeah, overall you've got the right idea with the decay and all of that. I would have expected this to light the torch itself right here more, and maybe this part I'm not sure quite why it's so blocking that light. It could be that the source of light is here and those are shadows that you might, if that's the case, what did you say here? It's a point light, and I'm wondering if that light's too low. So it might be that the light is kind of right in the base there, but maybe you can kind of move it up here so it's kind of lighting the top of this a bit more, and it's not being blocked so much by the torch itself. I'm not sure why, we're not at least seeing the top ridge of that lit more. So maybe try moving the point light up a little bit if it's not already. But you're definitely getting a feeling for it. Looks like. So we've got Joseph. So I think you do actually, you said you don't have the shadow casting from the character, but you do like this. I can see it right behind. It's casting. And what's weird is that you have the shadow cast on the backdrop of the cloud. So like this tree as well as that. So that looks kind of odd. What you might want to do is kind of remove this backplate that you're using as a cloud and try using physical sun and sky, which I go over. I think that physical sun and sky does, if you're doing the outdoor thing, it's a built-in thing with Mental Ray. It makes it really easy. It works pretty well, and it's sort of like, you get your sunny day right off the bat, and things just kind of look good right off the bat. So maybe give that a shot rather than just using directional light and see if you like the results. But right now, I think that the biggest sort of distracting thing is how the shadows are being cast on the cloud backdrop itself, which is distracting. And so you could select the surface and turn off receives shadows. If we just look at that real quick. I know I'm in a different scene, but I just want to show the attribute in the attribute editor. under the render stats, you can turn off receives shadows for any surface. So if you turn that off for that surface, the shadows should not hit that cloud backdrop if you're going to continue to use that. But again, my suggestion is rather than doing that, do the mental ray, physical sun and sky. I think you'll be happier with the results. So here we got Evren. Yeah, it's kind of got a good fleshed out look. Liking the rim light along the edges here. I like that, you've got some foreground objects that are a little darker, some bright highlights up here, maybe a little more overexposed at the top than I would like to see. Our eyes tend to be drawn to the highest contrast point of the scene, which is here, and I would rather try to do things to kind of point our eyes to look at the character. And again, for this one, yeah, you've got kind of a nice rim light going on the character. You've got a cast shadow here, which is good. I don't know why the rocks are not also casting a shadow. I think that's going to be important. Right now they sort of stand out and look a little funny, I think in part because they're not casting a shadow. Yeah, and again, looks good. He's got a shadow cast in front of him. This seems to be casting a shadow here. You've got some kind of sort of a rim light there, and yeah, well lit. So overall, I think this is some good work. I think, yeah, it's working. Just maybe tweak some of the brightness there, and maybe do a couple of things to get the character to pop a little bit more on that one. But these are looking good. This is Rick. Definitely getting sort of a nighttime feel with this. I think for this texture, the repeats on too high because you see this very clear pattern. You might want to decrease the repeat on that. Yeah, it's got kind of a good nighttime look to it. You've got that bluish light, and it looks like maybe you have something warm coming from this side as well. And we're not really saying how that's justified, but that's okay. It can be something kind of off camera. Yeah, I mean, overall, I think it looks good. I think seems to be floating above the ground there, but maybe that's just the pose. One thing I might do is make him not so shiny, so maybe don't use, maybe it's like a Lambert material instead, or something, because right now he's pretty glossy for a character, which you probably wouldn't expect to be quite so shiny. And maybe you want to put like some Starfield backdrop in the sky, just to kind of flesh it out. But actually, most of the shots don't have the sky in them, so you won't need that. But for this one, it might be good to have something back there. Or you could just say it falls to darkness. I think I kind of buy that too. So either way. So this is looking good. Yeah, definitely got like a good kind of rim light going on the character to sort of separate him from the background. I think that whatever's lighting up here got a little too hot, so I might lower that, or maybe change the angle or do something so you don't get quite so much overexposure there. And this is maybe a little bright here. Yeah, from this distance things look better. We don't obviously see the top of that has that very, very bright light. If it's something in here that's lighting that roof, maybe you want to turn on the decay on that light so by the time it gets that high it's not lighting the underside of that roof. But yeah, that's looking good from that angle. And again, yeah, you've got a really nice rim light going, justified by the firelight behind them, so that's looking good. Dramatic, very nice job. So I think this one's working well. You've got the indoor light as kind of focal point, and I think he works well here because he's almost sort of silhouetted against the sky. So he kind of pops out just because of sort of the negative space around him, and then you have this kind of firelight, and it gives you that sort of contrast of kind of a secure and safe thing, and then obviously this dangerous contrasting figure over here. For a shot like this close up though, I think he needs more light. Maybe get like a rim light to sort of highlight some of these edges to kind of pop it out, and something to bring out the detail in the face, like a light from the side or something to start kind of carving out some of these details, because especially with this texture, the way it's painted on is sort of like you kind of lose that. So I think we need some bright light from the back or side to sort of bring out the features and shapes in the character. Yeah, that looks good. And again, I would work to do something to make the character pop more. So, for example, you could have a warmer light that we're justifying from here, even if reality wouldn't hit him as much. But to kind of hit him from something from this side, a kind of a warmer light to sort of get those edges to pop out, and then maybe like a bluer one from this side to get some of those edges. Because right now, the werewolf character sort of gets lost here, almost like camouflage with the same values as the background, so we lose them a little bit. So we want to do stuff to highlight those edges at least to pop them out of the background. This is Lupita. Yeah, I think that overall I would say a little bit dark, and that would be good to think about. What are your light sources? What's hitting them? What's in the background? Just right now, it's just too dark. So you could take your existing lights and pump them up, but also be thinking about what time of day, how is he lit. I mean, if it's nighttime, that's okay, but you want to get that kind of blue moonlight to kind of pop out those edges, or something like that, so that the character stands out. So yeah, overall it's just much too dark right now. That's the big thing. So get it brighter, and then think about source of light and time of day. And I don't know what these ALS files are. I don't even know how to open those. Oh, I'm sorry. You did make it brighter. Okay, here we go. So yeah, I definitely can see a lot more what's going on. Getting a little bit less of a sense of source of light. So he's fairly evenly lit, as is the rest of the scene, although it does fall to darkness in the distance. So, is it daytime? Is it nighttime? If it's day, is it a sunny day? Is it a cloudy day? What time of day is it? So make some of these decisions and get kind of a reference image of that lighting and try and match it, because right now, you could kind of argue this or that, very early morning, just right before sunrise, or something like that. But it's not clearly defined by the lighting, like what time of day we're looking at or what you're going for. So it looks okay. You can see the detail; it shows up, but it's just sort of evenly lit and doesn't, tell a clear story of time of day or weather or anything. So you might want to think about those things and try to emulate those.